If you were to drift silently through the coral reefs of the Indo-Pacific, or peer into the dark, cold tide pools of the Pacific Northwest, you might encounter a creature that looks like an hallucination. It appears to be made of liquid glass, neon light, and flowing silk. It has no shell to protect it. It has no bones to give it structure. It is a slow-moving, soft-bodied, colorful smear of biology that, by all conventional logic, should have been eaten millions of years ago. This is the nudibranch, commonly known as the sea slug, and it is perhaps the most beautiful and most deceptive animal on Earth. To the human eye, they look like artwork. They are painted in electric blues, warning oranges, and deep purples that seem to vibrate against the backdrop of the ocean floor. But this beauty is not for vanity. It is a biological warning sign. These creatures are the masters of chemical warfare, theft, and solar power. They are animals that have decided to stop being animals and start acting like plants. They are soft creatures that hunt the most venomous things in the ocean, eat them, and then steal their weapons to use as their own. But the biology of the sea slug is a paradox. How does a creature that is blind to its own beauty evolve such dazzling colors? Why would an animal voluntarily give up its protective shell to become a naked, fleshy, bite-sized snack for a fish? And is it true that they have figured out a way to photosynthesize, effectively becoming the only solar-powered animals on the planet? To understand the sea slug is to understand that evolution doesn't just favor the strong or the fast. Sometimes it favors the weird. Evolutionary origins. To understand why the sea slug looks the way it does, we have to go back about 100 million years to a pivotal moment in history for the molluscphilium. The ancestors of the sea slug were sea snails. Like the modern cousins, they carried heavy, calcified shells on their backs. These shells were mobile fortresses, protecting the soft, delicious snail from the gnashing teeth of a fish or a crab. But carrying a mobile home requires a massive amount of metabolic energy. It is heavy, it creates drag, and limits where you can go. At some point, a lineage of these snails made a radical evolutionary trade-off. They stopped building the shell. They decided to strip off their armor and face the ocean naked. This seems suicidal. In nature, being soft and slow usually means being dead. But losing the shell unlocked a new world of possibilities. Without the heavy calcium carbonate burden on their backs, these creatures gained mobility. They could squeeze into tiny crevices, slide through complex coral structures, and in some cases, even swim freely through the water column. This transition from shelled snail to naked slug, the word nudibranch literally means naked gill, was only possible because they developed a new way to defend themselves. They swapped physical armor for chemical armor. They evolved to become toxic, distasteful, and dangerous. Evolution proved that you don't need castle walls if you taste like death. It was a gamble that paid off, leading to an explosion of over 3,000 known species today, reaching from the poles to the tropics. Anatomy of the hermaphrodite. The sea slug is a creature of duality. If you look closely at one, you won't find a male or a female. You'll find both. Sea slugs are simultaneous hermaphrodites, meaning every single individual possesses fully functional male and female reproductive organs at the same time. In the vast three-dimensional loneliness of the ocean, finding a mate is difficult. If you're a male animal and you bump into another male, you've wasted your time. You can't reproduce. The sea slugs solve this problem with elegant efficiency. Dr. Terry Glossner, a leading researcher at the California Academy of Sciences, compares it to a drawer full of socks that are all the same color. Any two socks make a pair. When two sea slugs meet, they don't have to check to see if they're compatible. They simply align their bodies, usually right side to right side, where the reproductive pores are located, and engage in what is called reciprocal copulation. This looks somewhat like a handshake. Both animals extend a penis-like structure and insert it into the other. They exchange sperm simultaneously. When they separate, both individuals leave the encounter pregnant. This doubles the reproductive output of the species. Instead of 50% of the population producing eggs, 100% of the population produces eggs. It is an energy-intensive strategy, as making both eggs and sperm is costly, but for a slow-moving animal in a giant ocean, the ability to mate with literally anyone you meet is a survival superpower. The thief of stingers. Some animals make their own venom, like cobras or scorpions. This is biologically expensive. It takes a lot of calories to synthesize complex toxins. The elid nudibranchs found a loophole: theft. These sea slugs feed on nudibranchs, animals like jellyfish, sea anomalies, and corals. These prey animals are armed with microscopic harpoons called nematocysts, which inject potent venom into attackers. To most animals, eating a sea anomaly would be like eating a loaded shotgun. But the sea slug has evolved a digestive tract that is lined with a protective slime that prevents these harpoons from firing. As the sea slug devours the anomaly, it doesn't digest the stinger cells. Instead, it separates them. The immature, unfired stinging cells are transported from the slug's stomach through distinct canals and deposited into the tips of the long, finger-like projections on their backs called cerida. This is known as kleptocnide, literally theft of stinging cells. The slug stores these stolen weapons in specialized sacs at the very tips of their body. When the fish tries to bite the slug fires the jellyfish's own weapons into the fish's mouth. It is the biological equivalent of a human eating a venomous snake, storing the venom in their fingertips, and then injecting it into anyone who tries to shake their hand. They are utilizing the defense systems of their enemies to become invincible. The solar-powered animal. If stealing weapons wasn't enough, some sea slugs have learned to steal the power of the sun. This is a phenomenon found in a group called Sacoglossan, or sap-sucking slugs. The most famous of these is the Costasiella kuroshimae, often called the leaf sheep because it looks like a tiny, glowing green sheep grazing on a pasture of algae. When these sea slugs eat algae, they puncture the plant cells and suck out the contents. But they don't digest everything. They isolate the chloroplasts, the tiny solar panels plants use to turn sunlight into sugar and store them inside their own skin. This process is called kleptoplasty. Remarkably, these stolen chloroplasts continue to function inside the animal's body for weeks or even months. This effectively turns the animal into a plant-animal hybrid. In times of food scarcity, the slug can simply crawl into a sunny spot and photosynthesize. It generates energy from the light. Consider the implications of this through comparative biology. It would be like a human eating a salad and then not having anything to eat for a month, simply by standing outside and letting the sun feed the lettuce stored in their skin. It blurs the absolute line between the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, proving that nature is far more fluid than our textbooks suggest. Behavioral research. We know that nudibranchs are brightly colored, a phenomenon known as hypnotism. In nature, bright colors usually signal, "I'm dangerous" or "I taste terrible." Think of the poison dart frog or the monarch butterfly. But scientists wanted to know, is this just a bluff, or do fish actually learn? To find out, Dr. Terry Gosseliner conducted what he affectionately calls the barring fish experiment. In this study, researchers offered nudibranchs to predatory fish. When a naive fish, one that had never seen a slug before, spotted the colorful morsel, it would often strike. It would suck the slug into its mouth, but almost instantly, the fish would realize its mistake. The chemical defense of the slug was so potent and foul-tasting that the fish would violently spit the slug back out. The slug, usually unharmed due to its tough, rubbery skin, would float away. But the fish was changed. The researchers observed that the fish would display signs of distress, flaring its gills and shaking its head. Crucially, when the researchers offered the same fish a nudibranch later, the fish ignored it. It had learned. The bright colors had become a memorable warning label. This experiment proved that the slug's defense is a two-part system, a chemical punishment and a visual reminder, ensuring that once a predator makes a mistake, it will never happen again. The blue dragon, monster of the surface. Most sea slugs crawl on the bottom, but one species has taken to the sky, or at least the surface of tension. Glaucus atlanticus, known as the blue dragon, acts like an alien ship floating on the surface of the open ocean. It swallows an air bubble to stay buoyant and floats upside down, using the surface tension of the water to cling to the ceiling of the world. This creature is tiny, rarely growing larger than a coin. But it hunts one of the most feared creatures in the ocean, the Portuguese man-o'-war. The man-o-war is a colony of organisms with tentacles that can stretch 30 feet and deliver a sting powerful enough to kill fish and hospitalize humans. The blue dragon grabs onto the man-o-war and begins to eat its tentacles, using the same theft mechanism we discussed earlier. The blue dragon concentrates the most potent stinging cells of the man-o-war into its own finger-like kuroshimae. Because it concentrates them, a sting from a tiny blue dragon can actually be more powerful and dangerous than a sting from the man-o-war itself. It is a tiny, beautiful assassin that drifts on the wind currents, a concentrated package of stolen pain, waiting for an unsuspecting swimmer to brush against it. Sensory biology. For all their visual splendor, most nudibranches are legally blind. Their eyes are primitive spots at the base of their antennae. They can only distinguish light from dark. They cannot see the vibrant patterns of their mates. They cannot see the coral reefs they inhabit. They live in a world of smell and touch. To navigate, they use their two prominent antennae-like structures at their heads called rhinopheres. These are not eyes. They are superpowered noses. The rhinopheres are often layered with flaps or ridges to increase surface area, allowing the slug to detect minute chemical signals in the water. They are tasting the current. They use these chemical sensors to find food, locating a specific sponge or hybrid by its scent trail in a vast ocean. They also use them to find mates, tracking the pheromones of other slugs. It is a tragic irony of nature. One of the most visually stunning animals on the planet will never know what they look like. They are walking art galleries that are blind to their own masterpieces, signaling to the world with colors that they can never appreciate. Deep sea adaptation. As we go deeper into the ocean, sunlight fades. Below 200 meters in the twilight zone, red and yellow light disappear. In this world, being neon orange is useless because without light to reflect it, you just look gray. So, the sea slugs that live in the deep sea have evolved a different kind of fashion. Researchers have found that deep-sea nudibranches often trade their rainbows for high-contrast patterns of black and white. In the dim light of the mesophytic zone, contrast is king. A black and white striped pattern stands out against the murky, gray background, much better than a solid color would. This suggests that the predators in the deep sea, like fish or crustaceans, are still visual hunters, but they're looking for shapes and contrast rather than hue. It shows that the evolution of the sea slug is highly responsive. They are not just randomly coloring themselves, they are tuning their camouflage and warning signals to the specific physics of the light and their specific depth. They are biological chameleons, not in real time, but over evolutionary time. The pharmaceutical treasure. While we admire them for their beauty, we should also admire them for their chemistry. Because sea slugs are experts for chemical warfare, they are walking pharmacies. Scientists are currently studying the compounds found in sea slugs for potential human medicines. Some of the toxins they produce or steal have shown incredible promise. Compounds from a relative of the sea slug, the sea hare, are being investigated for their ability to inhibit tumors and even stop the replication of HIV. These animals have spent millions of years perfecting complex molecules to attack cells and stop biological processes. We are now learning to harness those molecules to attack cancer cells and viruses. But these creatures are fragile. They are often highly specialized, feeding on only one type of sponge or one type of algae. If the coral reefs die due to warming oceans or acidification, the food source vanishes and the slugs follow. They are the canaries in the coal mine of the ocean. Their disappearance is often the first sign that a reef ecosystem is collapsing. Losing them wouldn't just be a loss of beauty. It could be a loss of future cures for humanity's worst diseases. The lesson of the sea slug. The sea slug challenges our assumption about strength. We tend to think that survival requires armor, speed, or teeth, but the sea slug has none of these. It is a slow, soft, naked piece of flesh in an ocean filled with sharks and crabs. Yet, it thrives. It thrives because it chooses a different path. Instead of fighting the environment, it hacked it. It stole weapons from its enemies. It stole energy from the sun. It turned its own skin into a billboard that screams, "Do not touch." As you watch a Spanish dancer unfurl its skirt and swim through the water like a flamenco dancer, you're seeing a victory of adaptation. They remind us that there is no single right way to exist. You can be soft and still dangerous. You can be slow and still be successful. And you can be blind and still see the most beautiful things in the dark. In the end, The insane biology of the sea slug teaches us that sometimes the best armor isn't a shell. It's the audacity to be exactly who you are: loud, proud, and toxic.